We are entrusting the day and the endeavor to the Lord. Let's go. Welcome to my channel where I visit many good books but live in the Bible. My name is Sarah Christine, and today I would like to talk about George R.R. Martin's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I picked this up at the urging of a sister in Christ who I will call Legally Blondie, having been semi-familiar with the Game of Thrones universe. I'd never watched the original series, but I have watched House of the Dragon, and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms takes place between those two storylines. It is post House of the Dragon and pre-Game of Thrones, and by all accounts, it is much lighter fare than both. In fact, I saw a recent review of this titled Proof That George R.R. Martin Does Have a Heart. So if you are looking for a gentler introduction into the world of Westeros, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms might be a great place to start. If you aren't familiar with A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, this is a collection of 3 short stories, the first of which, The Hedge Knight, has been adapted by HBO into that TV series that is popping off right now. But there are 2 more stories, the first being The Sworn Sword, and the third being The Mystery Knight. And all 3 of them chronicle the adventures of endearing, dynamic, iconic duo Dunk and Egg as they attend tourneys, parlay between feuding parties, and get caught up in political intrigues. Hopefully, my edition of the book has pictures. So this is Dunk and this is Little Egg. As you can see, Dunk is pretty big. In fact, he's a hedge knight that's just 1 inch shy of 7 feet. And he grew up in a place called Flea Bottom, where he learned the finer points of fistfighting and theft until a man named Sir Arlen of Pennytree took him on as a squire. Sadly, Sir Arlen is now dead, but not before dubbing Dunk, Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle wall, or as Dunk aspires to be called, Sir Duncan the Tall. Dunk's little squire, Egg, is a 9-year-old boy with a completely shaved head, a good deal of book reading, and a mouth that is 3 times too big for him. In fact, as Dunk often notes, Egg is a good squire with a great deal of knowledge about knights and knighthood, but he's also insolent, always running the risk of getting a clout in the ear for his lip. Granted, Dunk did tell Egg when he took him on as squire that he promises to do as Sir Arlen did for him, and not beat Egg, except when he deserves it. All said, I adored Dunk and Egg's relationship, both in this book and in the HBO series, though I will admit the TV show removed some of the book's nuances and ambiguities, like things that were just implied in the text were made much more explicit on set, such as what happened before Sir Arlen's death. But it's Game of Thrones, and I feel like being explicit is kind of par for the course, and I was just glad watching the show that there weren't many naked bits, and when they did happen, it was kind of like Hacksaw Ridge, where they were intended to be humorous.
Now move your private part!
So, if you are keen on a story that will make you want to go to medieval times, and is also probably the most PG-13 thing that George R. R. Martin will ever write, I highly encourage you to pick up A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and fall in love with Dunk and Egg, just like me. And now I'd like to do a closer analysis of our 2 leading lads, so spoilers ahead. But before we do that, I want to talk in greater depth about the fact that, as Raymond Fossaway said, green is better than wormy. Dunk first meets cousins Stefan and Raymond Fossaway at the Ashford Meadow tourney, where Dunk has gone to enter the lists, meaning he wants to be a participant. Stefan and Raymond are sparring before the tournament begins, Knight Stefan walloping his younger cousin and squire Raymond so that the red apple of their house Fossaway, which is painted on Raymond's shield, is pretty much chipped to bits. Dunk is walking by at the time and he catches Sir Stefan's eye because Dunk, as we have said, is a pretty big guy. On page 38, you there, yes you, the big one, Knight of the Winged Chalice, is that a long sword you wear? It is mine by rights, Dunk said defensively. I am Sir Duncan the Tall. And I, Sir Stefan Fossaway, would you care to try me, Sir Duncan the Tall? It would be good to have someone new to cross swords with. My cousin's not ripe yet, as you've seen. Do it, Sir Duncan, urged the beaten Fossaway as he removed his helm. I may not be ripe, but my good cousin is rotten to the core. Knock the seeds out of him. That's the first invocation of the Fossaway apple, but later on when Sir Stefan reveals just how rotten he is, Raymond quits as his squire, gets knighted himself, and then repaints his shield so that instead of twinning with the red apple of his cousin, his apple is green. Telling Dunk on page 100, I fear I'm still not ripe, but better green than wormy, eh? I completely agree with Raymond. I mean, ideally, you don't want to fall on either side. You want to be just right, i.e. ripe. But if you have to be more green or more wormy, it is better, in my opinion, to be more naive than conniving. Or to riff off of Matthew 10:16, better to be wise as a dove than innocent as a serpent. So yes, green is better than wormy. However, as I kept reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, it became very clear to me that everyone is somewhere green and somewhere wormy. And that includes our two leading lads. When it comes to being green, Dunk, for instance, as massive as he is very green, i.e. ill at ease and unready when it comes to anything regarding book learning. And Egg, as highly educated as he is a little green bean when it comes to physically fighting. And when it comes to being wormy, Dunk can be pretty pig-headed, like we see in the third story, The Mystery Knight, when Egg warns him that the knights that Dunk is preparing to go up against are likely to beat him. Dunk does not listen. He persists in the tournament and almost dies from a lance to the head. And Egg, for his part, is impetuous. Again, in the third story, The Mystery Knight, Egg reveals his identity as a prince in the midst of a traitor's tournament, which puts him and Dunk in a really precarious position. But here's the thing, and I think it was the biggest contributor to what made Egg and Dunk and their relationship so endearing. Where Dunk and Egg are green, they look to and rely on one another to supply their deficiencies. Egg starts teaching Dunk to read, and Dunk protects Egg from his enemies. And where Dunk and Egg are wormy, they admit their wrongdoing. After Dunk gets that lance to the head, he thinks to himself, I should have heeded Egg. And when Egg's identity reveal puts him and Dunk in a pickle, he apologizes to Dunk, saying, I'm sorry, sir. Personally, that is an example from which I know I can learn. Big picture, I think in Dunk and Egg, we see that whether green or wormy, the proper response is humility. Where we are green, we say, that's something that I can't really do. I need help. I have to rely on someone else. And where we are wormy, we say, I've done wrong. I need to admit it and ask forgiveness. And if you, like me, are not always sure where you are green and where you are wormy, I highly recommend praying Psalm 139, 23 through 24, when David says to the Lord, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, i.e. the places where I am green, where I'm ill at ease and unready. See if there is any wicked, i.e. wormy, way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And I can tell you from experience, the Lord will let you know what is wrong with your apple. So yes, green is better than wormy, 100p, double tap, agree. And now for the analysis of our two leading lads. This isn't going to be comprehensive, but I do want to take a closer look at both Dunk and Egg's origins and development, because I thought it was really neat how Dunk goes from being kind of bottom of the heap, like flea bottom, to a knight, whereas Egg goes from being a prince of King's Landing to a hedge knight's squire. And even though those trajectories are kind of opposites of one another, they both experience so much growth in character. First up, let's chat about Dunk. We meet him, again, right after Sir Arlen's death as he's headed to the Ashford Meadow tournament. And when he gets there, he gets a pretty chilly reception. That's because, as a hedge knight, he's not attached to any particular lord or land, and so the other attendees, many of them knights of renown, look down on him.
He's not one of us.
And when Dunk presents himself to the master of the list so that he can participate in the tournament, he has to admit that there weren't any witnesses to his dubbing, his knighting, other than a robin, which is not going to be the best source of verification. On page 28, we get a snippet of that conversation. Dunk tells the master of the list, Sir Arlen always said he meant for me to be a knight, as he was. When he was dying, he called for his long sword and bade me kneel. He touched me once on my right shoulder and once on my left, and said some words. And when I got up, he said I was a knight. Humph. The man plumber rubbed his nose. Any knight can make a knight, it is true, though it is more customary to stand a vigil and be anointed by a septon before taking your vows. Were there any witnesses to your dubbing? Only a robin up in a thorn tree. I heard it as the old man was saying the words. He charged me to be a good knight and true, to obey the seven gods, defend the weak and innocent, serve my lord faithfully, and defend the realm with all my might. And I swore that I would. The master of the list is not convinced by this, and as it turns out, that's for good reason, because Dunk be telling a fib. Sir Arlen never knighted him.
You sit on a throne of lies.
That is made explicit in the TV show. In the book, it's just hinted at. Like, for the record, I missed it. But you know who didn't? Someone who did a wonderful review of this collection, which I'll link below, Bookborn. Yeah, she picked up on Dunk's banana split just from reading this. Anywho, though Dunk's knighthood is fictitious, in reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the Three Stories, the Hedge Knight, the Sworn Sword, and the Mystery Knight, it becomes apparent that there are a fair few knights in Westeros whose dubbing, their knighting, was performed by means and for reasons that are maybe not the most legitimate. On page 311, Dunk finds out that one of the other knights at this tournament he's participating in got his knighthood because he was willing to let another knight sleep with his sister. Like, to get a knighthood, he basically pimped her. Page 311. Any knight could make a knight. When he was squiring for Sir Arlen, Dunk had heard tales of other men who'd bought their knighthoods with kindness or a threat or a bag of silver coins, but never with a sister's maidenhead. That's just a tale, he heard himself say. That can't be true. But the man who's telling him was like, I heard it from an eyewitness. Basically, in the world of Westeros, the title of knight can be extorted, it can be produced to be a pimp, and it can be claimed without witnesses. That said, from the way things unfold and the fact that Dunk, our man Dunk the Lunk, is clearly a hero, it does seem less important how a knight is made versus how he is proved. Meaning, once you've got the title of knight, however you've got it, what matters is what you do. Because just because you're a knight does not mean you do what is right. We saw that in story 1, The Hedge Knight, with the aforementioned Sir Stephen Fossaway of the Rotten and Wormy Apple. And we see that in story 2, The Sworn Sword, with Sir Bennis of the Brown Shield, a knight who smells like a privy, and who proves to be a consummate bully and thief. Quick side note, but when all these various shields were being described, I could not help but think, like, if I had a shield, what would be on mine? Like, what image would I want to face down my foes? It would not be an apple, but I pulled this off my wall. I was like, this is what I would want my enemies to look at. Reginald, the multicolored giraffe. Let me know in the comments below what would be on your shield. Yeah, I'm just very intrigued. Anywho, as I was saying, knight does not equal right. As Sir Stephen and Sir Bennis prove, knights can be rotten apples and pieces of poo. That is a truth which eventually puts Dunk on the cusp of despair, because when he is in a fight for his life and needs other knights to take his side, none of them volunteer. And on page 99, Dunk cries out to them, "Are there no true knights among you? Like, are you all rotten apples or pieces of poo?" That begs the question, what constitutes a true knight? Conveniently, also on page 99, Prince Baelor of House Targaryen describes a true knight, saying, "This man," and he's talking about Dunk the Lunk, "protected the weak, as every true knight must." According to Prince Baelor, a true knight protects the weak, which is why he decides to take Dunk's side, as do many of the small folk, much to Dunk's surprise. On page 92, as Dunk is en route to that life or death fight, a woman called out, "Good fortune to you." An old man stepped up to take his hand and said, "May the gods give you strength, sir." Then a begging brother in a tattered brown robe said a blessing on his sword, and a maid kissed his cheek. "They are for me." "Why?" he asked Pate. "What am I to them?" "A knight who remembered his vows," the smith said. So yeah, any knight can make a knight, but a knight is proved by what they do, by protecting the weak and the innocent from bullies and brutes. And as I was revisiting the vows that a knight takes, that Dunk claimed to take on page 28, where he says, "Sir Arlen charged me to be a good knight and true, to obey the 7 gods, defend the weak and innocent, serve my lord faithfully, and defend the realm with all my might." I was like, I wonder what the vows of a Christian would look like. And what came into my mind was Luke 6:35, when Christ exhorts us, "Do what is good, love your enemies, give, expecting nothing in return, for then your reward will be great in heaven, and you will be called children of the Most High, because he is gracious to the ungrateful and the evil." Truly, I think that is a good basic vow of the Christian life, to say, I'm going to do what is good. I'm going to love my enemies, and I'm going to give, expecting nothing in return, because that is the example set by my heavenly Father, who is gracious to the ungrateful and the evil. And once we have come to Christ, that creed, that Luke 6:35, I think is a good summation of how we are to obey and abide. Indeed, Jesus makes it very clear that it is not enough just to claim the title Christian and then live in total disobedience. In Luke 6:46, so the same chapter as the vow we just took, Jesus asks his followers, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I command you? We see there that Jesus is very interested in our obedience. And if we claim the title of Christian and then don't live a life that is any different, I think we'll find ourselves in the uncomfortable position of, one, encountering people here and now like Dunk that are disappointed and despairing, and questions like, why do they call you Knight, Knight, if you do not do what is right? But we're also gonna probably, I think, have an uncomfortable time when we reach the judgment seat. I'm thinking Matthew 7:21 through 23, when Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. To the others, he's gonna say, depart from me, I never knew you. I wince just thinking about it. All that said, as it is with knights, so it is with Christians. It is less important how you start than how you finish. And now onto our second lad, Mr. Egg, number 2. Let's talk about his origins and development. Dunk first meets Egg at an inn and mistakes him for a stable boy. Reasonable enough, because at the time, Egg is muddy, he's got nothing but a rough spun brown cloak, and he's completely shaved his head. So the iconic white blonde locks of the Targaryen royal family can't exactly clue Dunk in. Later on, when Egg, aka Prince Aegon, 5th of his name, confronts his older brother, the Prince Arion, who is a total butthead, Egg tells him the reason he cut off his hair, on page 74, is, I didn't want to look like you. Which is fair. If I was Arion's sibling, I would not want to be anything like him. And to be honest, all of Egg's immediate family is pretty cringe. On page 70, Prince Maekar, who is Egg's father and the king's 4th son, is described as not quite as bold as Prince Baelor, nor as clever as Prince Aerys, nor as gentle as Prince Rhaegal. And Maekar's 4 sons, with the exception of Egg, aren't exactly anything to write home about either. Darren is described as a sot, Arion is the butthead, vain and cruel, and the 3rd son was, quote, so unpromising they gave him to the citadel to make a maester of him. Given that lineup, it makes total sense that Egg would not want to resemble such kin. But as the stories progress, it becomes evident that if Egg really wants to be different, it's going to take more than a shaved head. It's going to take a change of scene and discipline. To Dunk's credit, these are things which, once he learns Egg's identity, he readily perceives. After the events of Ashford Meadow, Prince Maekar approaches Dunk and tells him on page 116, my youngest son seems to have grown fond of you, sir. It is time he was a squire, but he tells me he will serve no knight but you. He is an unruly boy, as you will have noticed. Will you have him? Dunk is taken aback and he demurs that he's a lowly hedge knight, but Prince Maekar is like, I can remedy that. You can come and serve at my castle at Summerhall. But after considering it, Dunk refuses the offer and counters with this on page 117. I will take your son as squire, your grace, but not at Summerhall. Not for a year or 2. He's seen sufficient of castles, I would judge. I'll have him only if I can take him on the road with me. Dunk pointed to Old Chestnut. He'll ride my stot, wear my old cloak, and he'll keep my sword sharp and my mail scoured. We'll sleep in inns and stables, and now and again in the halls of some landed knight or lesser lordling, and maybe under the trees when we must. Prince Maekar gave him an incredulous look. Did the trial addle your wits, man? Aegon is a prince of the realm, the blood of the dragon. Princes are not made for sleeping in ditches and eating hard salt beef. He saw Dunk hesitate. What is it you're afraid to tell me? Say what you will, sir. Darren never slept in a ditch, I'll wager, Dunk said very quietly. And all the beef that Arion ever ate was thick and rare and bloody like as not. Maekar Targaryen, Prince of Summerhall, regarded Dunk of Fleabottom for a long time, his jaw working silently beneath his silvery beard. Finally, he turned and walked away, never speaking a word. Dunk heard him riding off with his men. When they were gone, there was no sound but the faint thrum of the dragonfly's wings as it skimmed across the water. The boy came the next morning, just as the sun was coming up. He wore old boots, brown breeches, a brown wool tunic, and an old traveler's cloak. "My lord father says I am to serve you." Prince Maker's other sons, Darren and Arian, had only ever known comfort and indulgence, and Dunk reasons, well, if Egg is going to be different, he's going to need different experiences, ones that are uncomfortable, less prince, and more servant. And reading that, I was like, yep, Dunk is correct. That will certainly facilitate Egg being different from Darren and Arian, because to be a prince and then choose discomfort and service, that is pretty much D and A's antithesis. In fact, it is much more akin to Jesus, who we are told in Philippians 2:6-8 did not count equality with God as something to be grasped, but he made himself nothing, taking on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself to the point of death, even death on the cross. And he did that for us. Like, Darren and Arian would never. So yes, a change of scene from princeling of King's Landing to a hedge knight squire will certainly do wonders for Egg's development and differentiation from his brothers Darren and Arian. It will make him less like them and more like Jesus. But in addition to a change of scene, Egg will also, on occasion, needs some discipline. A clout in the ear, to be specific. On page 193, after said clouting, Egg and Dunk have a conversation that eventually leads Dunk to ruminate on, the good of clouting. Egg says, "Sir, that fat septon said my father sulks in summer hall." "Words are wind. My father doesn't sulk." "Well," said Dunk, "he might. You sulk." "I do not, sir." Egg frowned. "Do I?" "Some. Not too often, though. Elsewise, I'd clout you in the ear more than I do." He only clouts Egg once. "You clouted me in the ear at the gate." "That was half a clout, at best. If I ever give you a whole clout, you'll know it." "The Red Widow gave you a whole clout." Dunk touched his swollen lip. "You don't need to sound so pleased about it. No one ever clouted your father in the ear, though," Dunk thought. Maybe that's why Prince Maker is the way he is. I am very much with Dunk on this. I mean, I have met some people where I can just tell, oh, you were never disciplined as a kid. And having babysat, nannied, and worked in church childcare for a minute, I can attest that kids that are undisciplined are less than pleasant, and they grow into adults who can be pretty hellish. And while I'm not saying a clout in the ear is the only way to discipline, the Bible does say in Proverbs 13:24 that the one who spares the rod hates his child, but the one who loves his child is careful to discipline him. To be honest, Dunk is an excellent example of careful, that is, full of care discipline. He doesn't clout Egg over every little infraction. In fact, Dunk only clouts Egg in the ear one time in this entire collection, even though he threatens to do it very frequently. It was only in a situation that was serious, where Egg would have been more hurt if he had been permitted to persist in his insolence, which, biblically speaking, checks the goal of careful, full of care discipline is our good, our protection, our benefit. We are told in Hebrews 12:10-11 that our earthly fathers discipline us for a short while according to what seems good to them, but God disciplines us for our benefit, that we might share in his holiness. And no discipline seems pleasant, but rather painful. But later on, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness in those who have been trained by it. I, for one, can testify that cosmic clouts in the ear have been very effective in training me to be less like myself and more like Christ. Like John 3:30 says, he must increase, I must decrease. And sometimes me decreasing requires that I, like Egg, get a clouting. All of that said, I so enjoyed A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, highly recommend it. And if you, like me, have been wormy, not doing what is right and pursuing an indulgent and undisciplined life, I pray that you would receive and believe in Christ, who is more than a knight. He is the OG King, who is able to redeem and restore everything. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was edifying, encouraging, and entertaining, and I hope you will continue to join me as I visit many good books, but live in the Bible. I just have to say, when Dunk assumed that Egg was called Egg because he was a little baldy, I thought to myself, what would be my name if someone were to rename me based on my physical appearance? And then I realized, oh my gosh, I already have an answer, because the water buffalo calls me Salamander because she says that when I stick my tongue out at her, which I do, not infrequently, I look like a lizard. If you are wondering why the angle is kind of weird and different, it is because I'm home for spring break and am experiencing the canon event of my parents retaking my bedroom while I am at college. Love you, Mom and Dad.